Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Andrea Limbago. I am a computational social scientist, so probably the only one I imagine within this entire event, but if there are others, I'd love to talk to you after. I spend a lot of my time focusing on the intersection of technology, society, and national security. And so within that, given that we're in the context of the future of cybersecurity, the way I look at it, we're at a very big inflection point right now, where on the one hand, we're seeing we all have data breach fatigue, we're seeing the high-profile breaches, and at the same time, we're in an era of unprecedented and untapped innovation due to the amount of data that is actually out there. And so how can we protect the data within this threat landscape while also innovate and share that data and go about our business so we can grow and preserve privacy, preserve security? And so it's within that dilemma that I'll talk about a project called the Trusted Data Format, which is open standard and open source, and always looking for collaborators in that area. So I'll talk about that and dive into that, and then give you a little bit of a view into what future we hope to aspire towards. I think this works. And so that context, really where we're going right now is, on the one hand, we have this techno dystopia, where we see the surveillance state, loss of privacy is everywhere. There's no security as far as protecting the data, and basically it's under some sort of authoritarian Big Brother kind of atmosphere. On the other hand, we have the techno-utopia, right, where we got clean air, everyone has the security and privacy, we're really innovating to help solve a lot of societal ills that are going on right now, and we're able to maintain freedom of human rights and democracy and so forth. And so obviously these are two extremes that we see going on right now, but at the same time we're really at an inflection point where decisions that we're making right now are going to be pushing us towards one or the other in various ways. And so to look at a little bit of where we are right now, it's really not very hard to come across various kinds of headlines that fit the techno-dystopia. I mean, this takes 2 seconds to come across these. And so you find the apps, third-party apps are sharing your data, perhaps knowingly or unknowingly to the users. And the privacy, there are plenty of op-eds that are discussing that right now. Looking about using DNA and other kinds of data to help track people, in addition to the geolocations and so forth. The rise of digital authoritarianism, freedom of the net, if you don't follow that at all, they do a Freedom House as freedom of the net. We're about 8 years in a row of declining internet freedoms going on right now. And so we're really at a state where these kind of activities are not just China and Russia, they are starting to spread to some other countries. We're seeing different governments using spyware on their own citizens and so forth. And so that's sort of getting us down that road toward the techno-dystopia. And what we don't hear about quite as much is this notion of the techno-utopia. And so how we can leverage this data to actually maintain security and privacy and innovate and grow for organizations. Looking at, and all these require some sort of data sharing. And so at the end of the day, it's releasing the power of the big data environment that we're getting into while maintaining the security and privacy. And so these are just a variety of the societal ills that we can think about, anything from climate change to poverty to enhancing freedoms for democracy. All those are basically what we're starting to see more and more discussion popping up, because there's part of this groundswell that's pushing it back against the the FUD that sort of overtakes our industry, and trying to highlight what we can be doing and trying to get out of this rut and improve the way that businesses and organizations can go about innovating and growing their business. And so that gets us to the modern conundrum, because with that techno-dystopia, we're really, the impulse is to lock down your data as much as possible, to not share it, keep it as protected as best as you can. Now, obviously the challenge with that is that limits innovation, that limits growth, and it does, it gets much more closer to the lack of communication across organizations, across people. But we still need to lock it down, right, against the various, we've seen across the various discussions today from the criminal actors, the nation states, hacktivists, even other corporations are getting to the game as far as the attack landscape. So how do we secure the data from those threats, but also reap the benefits of sharing the data and getting towards that innovation as well? And that really, that's it's a catch-22 that we're dealing with right now. How can we do both? And so a project that we're working on is the Trusted Data Format. And so it's part of the larger virtual platform, and the TDF is an open standard, and I'll get into the details in a little bit. And what it does is, it helps protect the data wherever it travels, helps you collaborate with it. It has a protective wrapper in it that also allows for auditability and tracing and very fine-grained access control privileges. And I'll get into the various aspects of it. But this is a solution that we're working on. And again, we'll be open sourcing a new component of it, and I'll talk about that towards the end of the talk, to look for more collaboration across various industry partners. But before I dive into the details on that, I want to get a little bit into the current mood within our industry. Because again, I think we see it a little bit today. I go to a lot of the various security conferences from Black Hat, RSA, and so forth. And really what we hear is a little bit of an acquiescence that, okay, breaches are going to happen. Let's just assume that's going to happen. There's nothing we really can do about it. My data is already out there. Actually, New York Times has an interesting thing where you can go through the various breaches and find out what of your data has actually been compromised that's out there already. And if you haven't done that, I recommend going through and looking at it. But there is this notion that my data is already out there, so who cares? What can I do about it? Almost every public opinion poll shows that faith in technology in the tech companies is on the decline, much lower than it ever has been, and it continues to drop a little bit more. And then there's this notion of breach fatigue, which basically, we keep seeing the high-profile breaches. If it's not over 500,000 records, hardly even registers in our conscious at this point. If you think about the Marriott breach, initially they thought it was going to be 500,000. It dropped down a little bit, but even that, when you start talking to people, it kind of just flew over the radar at that point because it's like, it's just another one that's out there. And so that's kind of where we are as an industry and as people who are dealing for a broader population. That's kind of how we're looking at it, which doesn't help us go towards that techno-utopia future. It's more so acquiescing that we're going to be under the surveillance state. We're going to be under the all data being accessed, and there's nothing we can do about it. But fortunately, we actually over the last year have started to see a shift in the sentiment, which I think is really interesting to see. So the shift is underway. We're starting to see, especially at the grassroots level, and I would argue that's from a combination of things, anything from 2017 had the global ransomware attacks from WannaCry, NotPetya, Bad Rabbit as well, some of the worst ones that we've seen. I know in the UK, you felt that very closely with National Health Services. But then also Cambridge Analytica, really I think for a lot of people was a big wake-up call as far as the unauthorized data sharing as well. So it's not just the data breaches and the attackers, but it's also some of the unauthorized data sharing that consumers may not necessarily have been aware of. And because of that, because of this grassroots shift is starting to go right now, companies are starting to respond to that and starting to realize that privacy actually can be a force multiplier. So we hear all the time, again, especially in the US, we see on the Hill some of the tech companies coming in and saying that privacy and security, well, if we follow and comply to all these regulations, it's going to squash innovation. While they're saying that on the one hand, other companies are starting to step up, but no, actually privacy actually can be a force multiplier for us and actually can be beneficial. And so part of it is that shifting public opinion is demanding this. So again, if you think about supply and demand, consumers are going to go towards what they need. And if they're demanding more and more privacy, that's going to help stimulate innovation and stimulate the way businesses might change some of the way they do business. And because of that, they're starting to look at how privacy can be a force multiplier for innovation. And so by instead of siloing down your data and not sharing with other groups or who you need to for business, actually leveraging it for innovation to find those untapped resources that are untapped insights that might come from data sharing. And probably the most important thing, at least for getting organizations to start to take privacy much more seriously, is that can be a competitive advantage. If all else is equal between two different products, perhaps the one that better secures and upholds privacy and security for the data, that might be the one that the consumers are going to go with. And so one of the stark example that we see most recently, if you've been following any of the big tech companies have been putting forth their various manifestos lately. Facebook just had one about a week or so ago. And within it, had end-to-end encryption, secure data storage, and really a big focus on privacy. And interesting, again, you coming a year later, after everything that's been going on with Facebook, trying to leverage privacy as that branding, as that competitive advantage, and especially using it in stark contrast to some of the competitors. And they're not the only one that's been doing that. Apple came out maybe in October, had a big discussion on how privacy, they're going to be the company of privacy and protecting data. Cisco similarly has, Microsoft has in the past. And so it's becoming much more of a competitive advantage for companies, both in the tech area, but then really for any, almost every company is a tech company these days, right? So it can be a force multiplier for any organization looking at as consumers demand more and more privacy of their data. And so for us, we very firmly believe that privacy can be that force multiplier, that it can be the way to get untapped innovation so far within the big data environment. And so one way we think about doing that is through something called the trusted data format. And so here we can dive into it a little bit deeper. First, and this again, most importantly, it's an open standard. So again, within this context, it's no black boxes here, not proprietary. And we know that they're very complex data sharing requirements. And so even within data itself, you want to have very fine grain, perhaps share part of the data, not other aspects of the data, and TDF enables you to do that. Importantly, it's also data agnostic, so it doesn't matter the data type. And within the protective wrapper, it enables the secure and auditable sharing within it. So you have that traceability that often gets lost. And one of the ways this is actually, we've seen this being beneficial, there's a case, actually, via Twitter, we saw a reporter was asked for the Bandersnatch data, almost a choose your own adventure. And so the reporter asked Netflix for all that kind of data under right of access, under GDPR. He was testing that out, and Netflix was able to provide that data through Virtue and through the trusted data format. And so fairly easy way to both comply with some of the regulations that are coming, but also provide the auditability and traceability for the data. The attribute centric, so that really provides that fine grain access control that I was talking about. But what's important in this is also we focus very strongly on usability. So again, encryption's been around for a while. We know that, decades. Part of the reason why a lot of people don't encrypt their data is it's too hard, right? So again, as a social scientist, I do a lot with human-computer interaction. If something is not made easy and to fit within the normal business flow of what a user is going to be doing, they're not going to do it, and they're going to find those workarounds. But if you make it very easy for them to do it and make it fit within their business flow and help them achieve their business objectives as opposed to being a hindrance for it, they're going to be using it. And so that's where we make it as easy and usable as possible to enable the broader workforce to be able to leverage these kind of capabilities. It travels with the data, and so it can easily integrate into existing technology stacks, which again is something that's important. I'll walk through a use case in a few minutes, where it doesn't matter if it's the most up-to-date and modern technology stack or one that could probably benefit from some modernization, but resources may not be there. We can integrate into those kind of existing technology stacks. And then, like with data agnostic, it also works across devices and platforms. No need to think you only can work within Google or only within the Microsoft environment and so forth. And so that fine-grained access control is important because it fits back to where some of the original impetus for why TDF even came to be. And so I think it's important to understand where it came from to actually see what it is now and where it's going. And so for just a brief history of it, so our CTO created it while working in the intelligence community. It started off as a research paper. Just an idea pulled together because of that requirement. So within classified environments, there's various levels of classification. You need to be able to send it to different people at various levels. In the private sector, it's very, very similar. It may not be the classification, but you do want certain groups of people to be able to have access to some data and certain groups not to have access to that data. So very similar kind of requirements driving the creation of it. And so about a decade ago, it was a sort of an idea within a research paper, won one of the top awards, and eventually over a few years, within the intelligence community in the United States, it became adopted as a formal standard. A year later, working within the intelligence community, seeing this as a capability that could actually benefit the broader population and help support security for more than just the IC, we were allowed to take it out of the intelligence community, make it open standard for the greater public access to it. And that happened when Virtue was founded. And since then, obviously, several years have passed, and so we've been innovating and expanding it. And so in a few months, we'll be releasing a software development kit and have done additional augmentations to it, given how much the data environment has changed over the last decade. And so I'll talk about what some of those are at the very end of the talk. And so within, to talk about what some of the IC requirements were as far as sharing across various classification levels, again, it's very similar in here. So within the current solutions that are out there, we've got basically, the perimeter notion. We hear that all the time, that the perimeter is dead and no longer exists. But even within the perimeter, if you look at some of the cloud migrations going on, you may already be handing over control and access to data, even within the cloud environments. And so you lose via various point solutions, via some gaps are going to exist, and then with the migrations to the cloud that are going on, there may be even greater loss of control over that data. And that's only within your own environment, right? Forget about then you think about sharing it everywhere here. If anyone was in the McAfee talk earlier, did a nice job explaining how once it even goes out, even with some unintentional misconfigurations can also lead to some data leaks and breaches that go on. And I think honestly, if you look at some of the big trends that are going on, it's the misconfiguration of some of these cloud servers and how users are using them is actually leading to a lot of these data leaks and privacy leaks that are going on. And so this is again where the state of the security is. End users are still very, very frustrated that whether authorized or unauthorized data is leaking out. They want to have more control over that data. And so with our vision, basically the protections go with the data wherever you want it to go. And so again, that's why the data-centric approach, it protects the data, even at various fine-grained attribute levels across the various data formats. And so one thing to think about is this notion of persistence. And again, I've spent a lot of time analyzing, studying adversaries, nation-state criminal actors. When you hear persistence, you actually think more so about persisting within a network. And that's something that the criminals and the nation-states tend to do, especially the advanced persistent threats. Obviously, that's where the P comes from. You tend to, once they find their way in, they will stay within a network, move around laterally, go about getting various admin privileges and so forth until they can get the data they want. But that persistence also can be something that defenders can use, right? And so if we can have that persistent protection on the data at the very attribute level and in a very data-centric approach, those protections persist with that data wherever it goes and with whomever you share it with. And so as I was going along and talking about some of the aspects of the trusted data format, what I didn't mention was some aspects as far as once you're encrypting it, you also have these various controls that can go along with it. You can revoke it. You can retire some of the data. You can audit as it goes along. And so having that revocability and pulling it back as well, we all know that within the social systems, there may be people that you want to have access to that data, but perhaps they leave your company and you no longer want them to have access to it. You can revoke those privileges. And so all those kind of privileges go along with the data wherever it goes. And so, again, something to think about as far as, we always think about the notion of think like the adversary, and normally it's try and outwit them, be more creative than they are. What about leveraging some of the notions of, of that persistence and staying on that, having the persistent control and auditability on the data wherever it goes and whomever you're sharing it with. And so that's something that, that's our vision for where we can end up going and how TDF within the virtual platform also can help get you there. So it's all good to sort of talk high level, right? We have this sort of like the PowerPoint deep, and I think we've all been in this industry long enough to be a little skeptical, as we probably should be. So I want to walk through two different use cases that we've done with various customers. And the first is in the financial sector. This one, again, I think the financial sector was one of the more heavily regulated ones. And so they've been, I think when you start looking at the various sectors, financial sector tends to be the one tends to be more forward-leaning as far as security and privacy, and understandably for both the costs involved and for the risk, both from the threats and for compliance components. But the problem is that there are these data silos, and so there's all this data that's in there, but it's not getting shared. And so what happens, both due to the need to protect their own IP and their own PII, is that it provides an incomplete picture of what the threat landscape is. And so especially in the financial sector, where we see so many global campaigns against against the financial sector, that incomplete picture can be very limiting, right? So even we've got fraud prevention as the use case in this, but if you think even bigger than just fraud prevention, there were indictments against Iranians just a few years ago in the United States for attacking over 50 banks, and so very similar techniques, tactics, procedures were being used across the entire industry. With the breakdown of talks with North Korea, there's been a spike again of North Korea going after various banks within the financial system. And so within the financial system itself, it's a very big target for broader campaigns. And so by having an incomplete picture of what that threat landscape looks like is really, it puts it at a competitive disadvantage when trying to both prevent against fraud and against the broader nation-state attacks. And so what if, within the financial industry, we could get to a point where, especially in the fraud, where through collaboration and cooperation and putting data together in ways that had not yet been analyzed, we could actually stop some of this before a security event actually happens. And then what if, instead of just having it be within one organization, it could scale to however many organizations you feel you need to share with. And so that's what we have done with Trust Data Format and with various banks that are out there. Basically, this is a simplification, obviously, so it's only the two, 1 and 2 different organizations. But again, it can scale to however many organizations that you want. And so basically, when you've got the data owners on each side can set the policies for what data is accessible and what data is not. And again, they still have the ability to revoke it and limit the various kinds of exchanges of it. But if they share it within a secure computing enclave, and within there, that's where some of the traditional algorithms can work to detect fraud. Except now they're leveraging much more data from different groups who have a little bit different picture, and so it's providing that more holistic landscape that's out there to help detect better. And once that happens, once the algorithms can detect some of the anomalous behavior, can send the alerts back and hopefully stop the security event before it happens. Now, a very different industry with some, again, different requirements, but still, again, high regulatory environment, and again, very high threat landscape. If you think about ransomware especially, is very well known for targeting the healthcare industry. And so within the healthcare industry, what a lot of hospitals are doing is they're basically locking down within one silo the electronic health records of the patients, which is one way to lock it down, but then it also introduces a higher degree of risk, single points of failure, again, the lack of being able to provide that data with other folks that may benefit from it, especially to help improve patient services and outcomes. And so the challenge they really want to be able to do is how can they share that data across the insurers, across the patients, to other hospitals, while complying at the same time. And so this, again, where TDF can come into play is that protection that persists wherever it goes. And so it travels with the data wherever it's shared, enabling that revocation audit and tracking within that as well. And most importantly, it's within a workflow that makes sense for what the normal day-to-day workload is for the hospitals. And to show you an example of what that may look like. So again, this is sort of your single point of failure right here. It's locking down the data, but now you're able to share it much more so. So whether it's the patients, insurers, out-of-network laboratories, for all the various means for research. And this is where a lot of the innovation can happen as well. So on the one hand, you've got the hospitals. They're able to focus much more so on patient care than spending all the time actually having to figure out how to share it. What TDF helped replace in several of these instances was actually faxing or snail mail some of this data. And so it really helps in that area. We work closely with the Department of Veterans Affairs within the United States and have helped really automate and help expedite a lot of these processes while complying and enabling them to share with all the various groups that they need to be sharing with. And importantly, it works both directions as far as the data can also be sent back with those protections that are remaining that can help with some audits as need be for those hospitals. And so those are just two quick examples to go through some of the experiences that we've had with our customers. And looking out at the future, I want to look back at how data sharing and security can go hand in hand. They don't have to be a trade-off or be mutually exclusive. And I think that's really important because that innovation and openness that can come from the sharing can much more so help lead to the utopia versus the dystopia. And so on the one hand, you've got the FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that still, I think, sort of it has a shadow across our industry, given all the various threats and so forth that are going on right now, and with the data abuse, misuse, and theft. But what if you could protect your data, keep the security on it, but then share it for that innovation? So that's getting at both of those requirements that organizations have. And so if you can protect your data and share it too, you can innovate better. Good example, if you think about like new things that can be done with genetic testing and genetic data. But that needs really, really, really secure data, right, to prevent misuse and leaking. And so within that data, imagine what could be done as far as curing diseases. Same thing can go for climate change. Same thing can go for any kind of innovation to help organizations grow. And on top of that, help create efficiencies. So instead of hindering the workload and hindering business processes, actually helping augment them. And so a few areas where we're looking at going ahead. software development kit, we're releasing that early summer. And so please reach out to me. We already have it up and running at developer.virtue.com. If you want early access to that, I can give you my card. You can reach out to me if you want to be part of that community and do some of the early testing with it. That would be great. And part of the reason why we want to be doing that is helping grow the community as a whole. I think even earlier today, I think in one of the talks we saw that the value of open sourcing, and we want to help contribute to that, and very much so believe in the mission of helping all organizations, whether you're Fortune 500 or small, medium enterprise, be able to protect their data and share it as well. Also, TDF 3.0 also will be coming out shortly. Again, if you saw the initial IC TDF, that's going on about a decade. The data environment has changed significantly since then. And while we have revamped it internally, we're going to be releasing TDF 3.0 that much more so reflects what the current data environment looks like as far as streaming, the size of the data people need to be sharing these days, moving from XML to JSON, all sorts of these usability aspects as well to make it more user-friendly. And all of this, for us, we see it hopefully be part of pushing forward this data privacy global movement that's going on. And we really are. If you look at public opinion polls, they are demanding, people are demanding greater privacy. And then we see all these other trends that are going on across the globe for more government access by some of the authoritarian regimes. And so we want to be able to protect the data wherever it goes, whether it's within the UK or goes to other countries across the globe, to maintain that protection and help support the data privacy movement towards the right direction as a fundamental human right. For partnerships, you can always looking for partnerships. So again, if you want to look into the software development kit, the SDK, or other ways to partner, please reach out. And really, core, we want to get rid of those silos. We want to be able to protect that data, eliminate those silos, and help progress all of us as a society in all organizations towards more of that utopian vision. And while on the one hand it's aspirational, which is 100%, if we don't aspire towards something like that, other influences will come in that will not have the more beneficial and humanitarian aspirations, and we cannot have that. We need to have, as a community, we are probably at the ground zero for pushing back against those kind of regimes that are going on and an unprecedented amount of data access that's going on. And so we want to eliminate the silos, work together as a community, and help move towards that future of cybersecurity that is more beneficial and promotes democracy and fundamental rights. And that is it. So hopefully get you to the next one on time, but I will be around. We also have a table downstairs if you want to talk to some of our folks for more information about TDF and Virtue as a whole. So thank you for your time.